What if the strange feelings you've had this week weren't random at all? The restlessness that shows up right before sleep. The sudden urge to clean out a closet you haven't touched in years. The friend who texted you out of nowhere after months of silence, saying the exact words you needed to hear. You felt it, even if you couldn't name it. Something has been shifting quietly underneath the surface of your ordinary days. And what if July 31st isn't just the end of a month, but the edge of a doorway that millions of people in different corners of the world pause to notice every single year? Some call it a portal. Some call it a season of release. Some don't have a name for it at all. They just know that late July feels different. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because by the end of this, you may recognize 7 signs that have already been quietly appearing in your life, and you may finally understand what they've been trying to tell you. Every year, as summer reaches its peak and the days grow long and golden, something ancient stirs in the collective imagination. Across many spiritual traditions, late July and early August mark a symbolic threshold, a stretch of time some call the Lion's Gate portal. It's said to reach its peak on August 8th, but many who follow this belief say the feeling of it begins earlier. Some say it begins right around July 31st, on the very last breath of a month that already asked so much of you. You don't have to believe in astrology to notice that certain times of year simply feel heavier, or lighter, or more charged with meaning. Think about New Year's Eve, and the way the countdown makes even strangers pause to reflect on the year behind them. Think about your birthday, and the quiet inventory you take of your life without even meaning to. Think about the first cold morning of autumn, when something in you instinctively knows the season has turned, long before the calendar confirms it. Humans have always marked thresholds, moments that separate one chapter of life from the next, even when nothing about the physical world has technically changed. The Lion's Gate is one of those thresholds, named, in part, for its symbolic connection to the constellation Leo and the star Sirius. This window of the year has been observed by different cultures for centuries, long before social media turned it into a hashtag. And whether you see it as cosmic, symbolic, or simply a comforting story we tell ourselves, there's something worth paying attention to in the days ahead. Because change, real, quiet, internal change, rarely announces itself with fireworks. It arrives first as a feeling, a subtle shift in your energy, a conversation that lingers longer than it should, a memory that resurfaces uninvited, pulling you back to a version of yourself you thought you'd already outgrown. A sudden clarity about something you've avoided for months, arriving not with drama, but with the quiet certainty of a door finally being pushed open. If any of that sounds familiar, you may already be standing at the edge of this doorway, and you may not have even noticed you were walking toward it. Let's be honest about something before we go any further. Nobody can prove that a portal in the sky is rearranging your life. Nobody can hand you scientific evidence that the stars are conspiring in your favor. This isn't about facts. It's about meaning. The kind of meaning humans have always found in the sky, in the seasons, in the quiet rhythms of nature that existed long before smartphones and social media taught us to expect instant answers to everything. Many spiritual traditions, from ancient Egyptian astrology to modern practices like the law of attraction, treat this window of the year as an invitation, not a guarantee, not a promise, an invitation. An invitation to slow down in a culture that rarely gives you permission to do so without guilt. An invitation to ask yourself what you're ready to release and what you're ready to welcome in its place. Some interpret this season as a time when old patterns rise to the surface, almost like sediment stirred up in still water, so that you can finally see them clearly enough to let them go. It's not that the patterns weren't there before. They were always there, quietly settled at the bottom, easy to overlook when the water stayed calm. This time of year, some believe, simply stirs the water. Others believe it's simply a natural pause, a moment built into the calendar where reflection feels easier than usual, the way a long drive can loosen thoughts you didn't realize you were holding on to, or a quiet evening alone can bring a memory rushing back that you hadn't thought of in years. You don't need to accept any of this as literal truth. You only need to stay curious. Curiosity costs you nothing, and it has a quiet way of opening doors that certainty never could. Because whether or not the universe is doing anything at all, you are still the one living inside your life. You're still the one who wakes up in it every morning, who carries its weight and its joy, who ultimately decides what to do with each new day. And noticing patterns, even symbolic ones, has a strange way of helping people make real changes, simply by giving them permission to look at their lives a little more closely than they normally would. So, as we walk through the next several minutes together, keep this in mind. None of this is about magic saving you, or a portal doing the work for you while you wait passively for it to arrive. It's about you recognizing something in yourself, perhaps a little earlier and a little more gently than you would have otherwise. Let's begin with the first sign, because chances are you already know exactly what it feels like. Maybe it's the job that used to feel secure and now feels like a costume that no longer fits. Maybe it's a friendship that used to feel effortless and now feels like static on a phone call, words being said but nothing really landing. Maybe it's something even smaller than that. The coffee shop you've gone to every morning for 2 years suddenly feels like the wrong place to sit. The route you drive to work feels longer than it used to, even though nothing about the distance has changed. A television show you used to look forward to now just plays in the background while your mind drifts somewhere else entirely. You haven't changed on the outside. Your schedule probably looks the same as it did last month, but something on the inside has quietly shifted its position, like furniture rearranged overnight by someone you never saw. Many people describe this feeling in almost identical words. I don't know what's different, but something is. They'll tell you their life looks the same on paper, same house, same routine, same faces around them, and yet it feels like they're watching it from a slight distance, as if standing just outside a room they used to stand inside of. Some spiritual traditions interpret this as the early stage of the Lion's Gate season, a time when your inner self starts to outgrow spaces that no longer reflect who you're becoming. It doesn't mean something is wrong with your life. It doesn't mean you need to make a dramatic decision today. It may simply mean a part of you is beginning to ask for something more aligned, more honest, more yours. This kind of quiet disconnection can actually be uncomfortable in a way that's hard to explain to other people. You might catch yourself trying to describe it to a friend, only to hear yourself say, "It's nothing really, I'm just off." But it isn't nothing. It's often the very first whisper of a much larger shift. If this first sign feels familiar, the second one might explain why. A conversation ends earlier than planned. A relationship quietly fades instead of dramatically ending. A door you thought was permanently open closes without much warning at all. Maybe a project you poured months into gets cancelled. Maybe a plan you were counting on falls through at the last minute and there's no clear explanation why. Maybe someone you talk to every day suddenly goes quiet, and the silence says more than any argument ever could. At first, endings like this can feel unsettling. You might replay them, searching for what went wrong, or wondering if you could have held on a little longer, said something different, tried a little harder. But many who follow this seasonal belief say endings during this time of year rarely arrive to punish you. They arrive to make room. Think of a garden at the close of summer. The gardener doesn't remove healthy, thriving plants. She removes what's already withering. The overgrown vine choking the tomatoes, the flowers that bloomed and are ready to fall, so the soil has space and nutrients for what's coming next. It looks from a distance like loss. Up close, it's simply preparation. Some describe this pattern as one of the more disorienting parts of this season, precisely because endings rarely come with a note explaining themselves. You're left to sit with the empty space, not knowing yet what will eventually fill it. If something in your life has quietly ended in the past few weeks, you may not need to mourn it as a loss. You might simply be witnessing the natural clearing that some traditions associate with this exact window of the year. The gentle, sometimes uncomfortable work of making room. And once that space opens, something curious tends to happen next. The same number keeps catching your eye, on a receipt, a license plate, the clock on your nightstand at 11:11 3 nights in a row. A song you haven't heard in years plays twice in one day, once on the radio and once, oddly, hummed by a stranger in line at the grocery store. A sentence someone says in passing feels oddly personal, like it was meant for you and no one else in the room. You might mention it to someone, half laughing. This is going to sound strange, but... And they nod, because it turns out they've noticed something similar lately too. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a form of selective attention. Your brain noticing patterns it would normally filter out, simply because you're paying closer attention to your surroundings than usual. Spiritually minded people describe it differently. Many believe these small repetitions are gentle nudges, invitations to pause and ask, what am I supposed to notice right now? You don't need to decide which explanation is true. What matters is the noticing itself. Whether it's your own heightened awareness or something more symbolic, the effect is the same. Your life starts to feel less like background noise and more like something worth paying attention to. Because once you start paying closer attention to your own life, you may find it harder to ignore what's been sitting quietly beneath the surface, waiting for you to finally look at it directly. Which brings us to something a little more uncomfortable. This is often the sign people like the least, and yet it may be the most important one. A memory you thought you'd resolved returns out of nowhere. A childhood moment, an old heartbreak, a mistake you haven't forgiven yourself for. Maybe it's a person's name that suddenly crosses your mind after years of silence. Maybe it's a specific sentence someone said to you long ago, replaying itself uninvited while you're washing dishes or driving home. It can feel like moving backward, especially if you believed you were done processing it, done feeling it, done thinking about it altogether. You might ask yourself, frustrated, why am I thinking about this again? I thought I was over this. But many spiritual teachers describe this pattern as a necessary stage, not a setback. They call it surfacing before release. The idea is simple. You cannot let go of what you refuse to look at directly. Whatever stays buried stays in charge. Think of it like cleaning a wound before it can properly heal. It stings first. It has to be seen, felt, and acknowledged before the healing itself can begin. A wound covered too quickly, without ever being cleaned, tends to resurface later, often at a less convenient time. If old emotions have resurfaced for you recently, you're not regressing. You may simply be standing at the threshold this season is said to represent, the place where old pain finally gets permission to leave, rather than continuing to live quietly in the background of your life. And as that emotional weight begins to lift, even slightly, something quieter tends to take its place. Maybe you've noticed yourself turning off the podcast halfway through, skipping the group chat just for today, just to see what it feels like. Wanting to eat breakfast without your phone anywhere nearby, or driving with the radio off, just to hear your own thoughts against the sound of the road. This isn't withdrawal. It isn't isolation either. Many describe it as a craving for inner volume control, a desire to hear your own thoughts again, clearly, without 12 other voices competing for space in your head at once. Some spiritual traditions view this craving for silence as a sign that your intuition is trying to speak louder than the noise around you. It's difficult to hear a whisper in a crowded room, so your inner world may be gently asking you to step outside that room, even briefly, even if just for a walk around the block, or 5 quiet minutes on the porch before the day begins. If you felt this pull toward quiet lately, consider honoring it, even for 10 minutes a day. Not as a chore, not as another task on your list, just as a small act of listening to yourself. Because that silence may be preparing you for the next sign, one that tends to feel the most personal of all 7. You make a decision faster than normal, and somehow it turns out to be the right one. You sense that a certain person isn't being honest with you moments before they confirm it. You feel pulled toward an idea, a place, or a choice, without being able to explain exactly why, only that it feels right in a way that logic can't fully account for. Maybe you take a different route home for no clear reason, and later find out it saved you from sitting in traffic for an hour. Maybe you hesitate before sending a message, and that pause turns out to save you from a misunderstanding. Small moments like these can be easy to dismiss as luck. But when they start happening more often, in a short window of time, they're harder to explain away. Many people describe this heightened intuition as one of the most noticeable parts of this seasonal shift. Whether you attribute it to increased self-awareness, quieter surroundings, or something more symbolic, the pattern is the same. Your inner voice becomes a little easier to hear, a little harder to talk yourself out of. Some spiritual traditions describe this as your inner compass recalibrating. Not being given new direction, but simply being allowed to speak more clearly, now that so much noise has quieted down around it. If you felt this stronger inner pull recently, pay attention to it gently, not with pressure, not by forcing every decision to feel monumental, just with curiosity, the way you'd notice a change in the weather. Because when intuition strengthens, something even deeper often follows. This final sign rarely arrives all at once. It tends to arrive in small, quiet moments. A morning where you don't reach for your phone right away. An argument you choose not to have, simply because it no longer feels worth the energy. A plan that falls through, and instead of panicking or spiraling into worry, you simply adjust and keep moving. You might notice it first as the absence of something, rather than the presence of it. The absence of that tight feeling in your chest before checking your email. The absence of needing to have the last word. The absence of lying awake rehearsing conversations that haven't happened yet. Many describe this as the emotional signature of the entire season, a loosening grip. Not because you stopped caring about your life, your work, or the people in it, but because you started trusting that not everything requires your control to turn out okay in the end. Spiritual traditions often describe this stage as the quiet reward for everything that came before it. The disconnection, the endings, the coincidences, the old wounds, the silence, the intuition. All of it, some believe, is designed to lead you here, to a version of yourself who feels a little more settled, a little more whole, even when life around you remains just as uncertain as it always was. If you felt even a small taste of this peace recently, you may already be further along in this season than you realized. Here's something worth remembering as we move toward the end of this journey together. Transformation almost never looks like the movies. There's no single dramatic moment where the sky splits open, music swells, and your life rearranges itself instantly into something new and finished. Real change tends to happen quietly, in the smallest hours of ordinary days, in places no camera would ever think to point. It happens in a decision to finally rest instead of overwork, even when part of you feels guilty for stopping. It happens in a conversation you finally have the courage to end, even though your voice shakes the entire time. It happens in a morning where you notice, almost by accident, that you feel lighter than you have in months, and you can't quite explain why. Nobody claps when these moments happen. There's no audience, no applause, no finish line to cross. Just you, quietly becoming someone slightly different than you were the week before. If you've recognized even 2 or 3 of these 7 signs in your own life recently, you don't need a cosmic event to validate what you already sense in your bones. Something in you is shifting, has been shifting for a while now, and is simply asking to be noticed. Some call it the Lion's Gate. Some call it late summer clarity. Some don't call it anything at all. They simply notice that this particular stretch of the year always seems to ask something of them, year after year, whether they're paying attention to the calendar or not. Whatever you choose to call it, the invitation remains the same. Not to force anything, not to chase certainty or rush toward an answer before you're ready for it. Just to notice, just to reflect, just to ask yourself, honestly and without judgment, what you're ready to release and what you're ready to welcome in its place. As July comes to a close, many people use this time to pause and reset their intentions before the new month begins, treating the final days of summer the way others treat the final days of December. You don't need elaborate rituals for this. You don't need candles, crystals, or a perfectly written journal entry with beautiful handwriting. You simply need a few honest minutes with yourself, somewhere quiet enough to actually hear your own thoughts. Consider asking, what have I been carrying that I'm ready to put down? What pattern keeps repeating in my life, showing up in different people and different situations, and what might it be trying to teach me? What would it feel like to move through August a little lighter than I moved through July? Is there a version of myself I've been quietly becoming that I haven't fully acknowledged yet? You might write these answers down in a notebook you've had sitting in a drawer for months. You might simply sit with them in silence, letting the answers surface slowly rather than forcing them. Some people find it helpful to speak their intentions out loud, as if speaking directly to the version of themselves they're hoping to grow into, the way you might speak encouragement to a friend who needed to hear it. Some people mark this moment with something physical, lighting a candle, opening a window, taking a walk outside barefoot in the grass. Others prefer nothing more than a cup of tea and a few unhurried minutes before the day demands their attention. Neither approach is more valid than the other. There's no right way to do this. There's only your way. The one that feels honest, unforced, and true to where you actually are right now, not where you think you're supposed to be. Whatever July has brought you, the endings, the quiet unraveling, the unexpected clarity, you've made it through to this moment, right here, watching these words unfold. Still standing, still here, still willing to look inward, even when it would have been easier not to. That alone means something. You don't need to have every answer before August begins. You don't need certainty to move forward or a perfectly clear plan for the months ahead. You only need a willingness to keep noticing, keep reflecting, and keep choosing yourself, one quiet moment at a time, one honest breath at a time. If any of these 7 signs resonated with you, you're not alone in feeling them. So many people, in this exact season, in cities and towns you'll never visit, are quietly walking through the same doorway right now, releasing what no longer fits and making space, gently, for whatever comes next. Take a breath. Let this season be gentle with you, even if it hasn't always felt that way these past few weeks. You've carried more than most people realize, and you're still here, still growing, still paying attention. And if this reflection meant something to you today, consider sharing which sign resonated with you the most. Someone else, scrolling through their own quiet unraveling late at night, might need to hear that they're not imagining it either, that what they're feeling has a name, or at least has been felt by someone else before them. If you'd like more reflections like this one as we move through the rest of this season together, you're welcome to stay a little longer here and walk through it with us, one quiet season at a time. Thank you for spending this time with yourself today. Wherever August takes you, may it meet you gently. This video explores spiritual perspectives and symbolic interpretations for inspiration and personal reflection. It is not intended as factual, scientific, financial, medical, or psychological advice. Individual experiences and beliefs vary,